Ari, for the breakouts, do you want me to put people into rooms or do you want to put people into rooms because you know the groups?
Yes, try
you
it.
just do the groups? Yeah.
Yeah, there are some folks that are in both,
Right.
so I'll just try to make it equitable.
Okay.
Let me get that
Ari?
ready to go.
Ari, hi, it's Rosie. I'm going to go ahead and make you host because I'm going to be logging into the different one, and then Shannon's going to be coming into this one now, okay? Okay, your host now.
Yes, Shannon, I saw your dad went to Reedley. And then that's awesome. So I'm like, go Tigers.
Yeah. He went in he was a first generation college student and he got a track scholarship to UC Berkeley. So my parents are from Dinuba.
Okay. Yeah.
And my dad got a track scholarship to UC Berkeley. Not only was he first gen, I think hardly anybody else in his family completed high school.
Yeah.
And he just failed out in the first semester. He did not know how to college. And
Yeah.
so he ended up going to Reedley College and getting an AS. And yeah, so when I actually, even when I was applying for the job at Woodland, I saw that they had the slides up from one of your presentations. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
Reedley College.
Reedley College.
I was very excited.
Yeah. What'd your dad major in?
Probably, I'm not exactly sure. Probably engineering. He went on to get a degree in engineering at Sac State.
That's
He got
awesome.
he got on with Caltrans before he had a bachelor's degree. Back when you could do things like that.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Thanks for getting us started, Candace. Reminder to everybody to put your name in the chat.
Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. So welcome to those of you who were not at the earlier Guided Pathways session. My name is Ari Metz and I teach English at Woodland Community College, and I'm one of the Guided Pathways faculty leads. This session is specifically going to be kind of setting some goals and working out the how-to of the Guided Pathways work that remains before us. So Stephanie's going to be guiding us through a process to kind of prioritize what our goals are and how we're going to achieve those goals. As a reminder, in order to ensure that everyone gets flex credit or credit for being in the session, please make sure that you type your name into the chat. And if you're ready, Stephanie, I will pass it over to you. Oh, Stephanie, your mic, please.
I always forget to unmute. So thank you guys all for coming to this session. I know it's late afternoon on a Tuesday, and you guys have had a really long day. But today we're going to kind of talk about some nuts and bolts kind of action planning for how to kind of get through Guided Pathways. These big chunk ideas of what we're doing with Guided Pathways. So I'm going to share my screen. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, or if you want to and you have a question, you can just unmute yourself. We're a small enough group. Feel free to do that so that we can actually kind of answer your questions as they come up as we go through. So today we're going to talk about setting priorities and kind of visioning for Guided Pathways as you're doing your work. And so I know today that we have kind of two main groups that are in our groups today, which is the onboarding group and the student success group, which are huge undertakings. Like these are big ideas and big groups. And so Ari shared with me your kind of long-term focuses for what you guys are doing for each one of those groups. So I just want to kind of ground ourselves into kind of like your big picture, where you're going with this. And then we're going to talk about like ways we can kind of break down that information into usable action plans as we go through. And we're going to give you some time also to kind of break out into groups and have a discussion about where you guys want to go next and how you're going to get there. So for the onboarding, you guys have some really big ideas, and that is like assess and revise your onboarding process. That's huge. That's a big thing. It's a needed thing, and it's an important thing. And you guys have already started that discussion, but that's something that's really going to take a lot of focus and energy. Establish bridges from K-12 to higher education, redesigning your traditional remediation, and providing accelerated pathways to support student success in college level courses in their first year. Your success teams are also focused on a couple of big topics, which is design the wraparound support processes and systems to ensure students make their choices in their path. And then the embedded academic and non-academic supports at that regular interval, so those milestones along the pathway to ensure that the students complete their goals. So those are big ideas with lots of small components within it. So we're going to talk today a little bit about how we can kind of chunk that down into what we can actually do each semester, each year as we go forward. But it's important when you're starting this work to kind of figure out what your North Star is and the reason why you're doing this work. Because the truth is the work's going to get hard, and it's going to only get harder. And especially when you're talking about systems and dismantling systems and changing systems, that's really hard work. And you will often run into roadblocks. And if you don't have a North Star, a reason why you're doing this and why your group is doing specifically the items you specifically addressed, work will get delayed, moved off. It's easier to retreat than it is to move forward. And so you really need that North Star idea of like why this is going on. And so at my college, ours is the Little Green Men. And so if you guys were at the presentation a couple semesters ago, my college at the first day of Guided Pathways, we had this infographic of little green men of the number of students we lost. And so they moved from green to red as we lost the students all the way through the 2 semesters. And so when we're having our conversations, we're getting hard, but like, okay, what about the students who we lost during that time period? And for a lot of us, that's kind of our North Star. We always kind of back to that conversation. Is what we're doing going to help the student who got lost along the path? And if it's not, why are we doing it? And number 2, if it is, then we need to move forward. We need to continue on. And we need to have the conversations even if they're hard. And even if we come from roadblocks. So I just want everybody to take just a minute and just kind of think about what you think is going to be the North Star for your group. And kind of just bring it in your head. And then when we break out into groups, you're going to have a chance to share that. And hopefully your group can kind of come up with some sort of collective North Star that when the going gets tough, you know why you're doing the work you're doing. So just take a minute and think about that, about why you're doing the work you're doing. And a minute always seems longer when you're waiting for it, right? It always seems intense. But again, we should always take a minute and think about why we're doing this. And so many of us is our students and the reason why we do this is our students. So think about what your North Star is when we have this discussion and what's going to keep you moving. So I also want to talk a little bit about the collaborative inquiry process. And we're thinking about doing these large projects. There's stages as we go through at these different processes. And so I like this collaborative inquiry process. And we've used this at my college many times where we've actually sat down and we've had to, like, where are we in the process? Do we have the data yet? And if we don't have the data, maybe that's where we need to start. And so where are we now? We kind of have to sit there and we have to say, where are we now, right? Where are we going? Where are we going to go after? Where do we want to go? What do we need to know in order to be able to get there? And this is that kind of inquiry process that sometimes we skip through. We often think like, this is where I want to go. This is where I am. I'm just going to go straight there. But I think it's really important to highlight an inquiry process. Like, what do we need to learn in order to make the decisions that we need to make that are going to be meaningful? And so it's really important to take that time and do the inquiry. Even if it seems like it takes a little longer, that inquiry is really important. And then there's creating the theory of action or an action plan about how are we going to accomplish this? Now that we have the data, we know where we're going to go, we've researched ways we can do it, what are we going to do? Right? And then the other one that we often skip is if we have an action plan, how are we going to assess whether or not it works or not? Because oftentimes we just go into action. And we just kind of hope things will work out. But what we don't do is we don't sit there and say, how are we going to know that this is going to work? And are we going to do that in a micro level and a macro level so that we can course change if things are not working? Oftentimes we'll say, well, we'll look at this over the next 2 years. Well, what if it's not working after the first 6 months? Do we need to tweak it? Do we need to change things? How can we embed these micro assessments all the way through our process so that we can course change as needed? And maybe things are going great. We want to see how it's going to go that next semester. We can keep on along the track. But again, if we need to make a course change, we need to embed in our discussions how we're going to be able to do that. And so we're calling them the micro and macro assessments. And again, that's one of those steps we often skip over. Because what we do is we want to act. But we need to know how we're going to be able to assess that. Or we do act and then we're like, oh, how are we going to assess that afterwards? Right? So we want to be proactive about assessment as we go through there. And then once we act, then we bring in the evaluation tools and then we reflect and analyze on what we've learned. So what changes are we going to make to our thinking and actions? How are we going to change things as they go through? And as you can see, this is a cycle. It goes around and around. So whatever you do and you succeed in something, you're going to have to continue to assess it. You're going to have to still looking at things. The system just starts all over again because we're constantly discussing things and moving things forward. And again, that's why your North Star is so important because again, it's an ongoing process. You need to make sure that you have the sustainability and the knowledge that this is really important work and we're going to continue it on. So I want to stop for a second and ask, does that make sense to everybody as we're going through? I know it's a little abstract right now, but when you're talking about different aspects of these things, you want to make sure you're processing all the way through these steps so you're not missing out on voices that you need to have and research that you need to have and data that you need to have to make these decisions. Because I don't know about you, but my college, we get in the room like, there's this problem, okay, we'll solve it. This is how we're going to solve it. And oftentimes we're just perpetuating something that's already in a system, right? So we have that conversation from the last time. We want to make sure that equity is in this conversation. So if we're looking at the data section in number 1, we're looking at the inquiry section in number 3, all the way through this process, there should be the question of equity. All right. And then the other thing I would recommend is you do the chunking. I know it's not a very visually, nice thing, and it as used as a verb here, which is going to drive our English faculty a little crazy, but that's okay. But chunking is that breaking skills or information into smaller and more manageable segments. We can't do it all at once. And that's another the reason why that cycle of inquiry works well, because it's chunking the process into multiple areas so that you can complete each one of them and move forward. So it's that old, how do you need an elephant? It's that one bite at a time. When you're doing these big systemic projects, you can't do them all at once. You have to break them up into the pieces and look at the inquiry process and chunk the areas so that you can actually complete things. Otherwise, you're too blocked to even start. I mean, if you look at like creating an entirely new onboarding process, that's a huge thing. You want to make sure you can like break it out. Okay, let's look at the data first. Let's look at what we need, what we want to go in the end. How can we make sure that everybody's included in this? Who needs to be involved? All those different things. You can chunk the process so that you can move forward. And I'm one of those people who loves lists. I love crossing things off lists. That always makes me really happy. I have Sharpie pens and do that. So it's really a great thing so you can like cross something off your list and continue on to the next thing. And that way you feel a sense of accomplishment. And you can actually celebrate those accomplishments as you go through the process. So for those of you who've ever worked in grants, there's a process called a logic model. And it sounds scarier than it is, and it looks scarier than it is. But basically what it does is it's kind of your roadmap to how you're going to complete a project, right? So you start out with like, what's your problem? Like, what's your problem, okay? And then you ask yourself, what do I need to address that problem? What kind of resources do I need? And that can be people, materials, computers, software, whatever you're gonna need to address that problem. The second is like, how am I going to address it? These are the activities you're gonna do to address that main problem. Okay, so the main problem is I'm going to redesign my onboarding experience. My resources may be data. I need partnerships with my K-12 groups. I need outreach to help with things. I need marketing. I need all those different things. Activities would be, I'm going to look at the data about who came and didn't come, who's missing from our activities. And I'm going to interview our students about what they wish they knew from the college. And number 3, we're going to test a micro project process that we're going to create for second-year students or something like that. And then what you're going to do is kind of that long-term, short-term outcomes. The short-term outcomes are your outputs, like what's going to happen immediately. I'm going to get this information. That's your kind of micro assessments. And then your outcomes are kind of like, what are my end goals? Those your end macro assessments. And so you're going to kind of create this kind of diagram of where we're going to go with this project and break it all out. So you have to kind of force yourself to have those conversations of who needs to be in the room, what kind of resources do I need, what kind of data do I need, what are my activities are going to be, and how am I going to measure that? All right. So what we're going to do is going to have a couple of breakouts and it's been about 20-25 minutes for each one of your groups to kind of think about these big ideas that I kind of brought in. The idea of what's your purpose? What's your North Star kind of as a group, and share what you thought about during that minute where we thought about what's your North Star going to be. And then I've created logic models for each one of you guys, for both of your different teams, for onboarding and student success. And I put in as your kind of long-term processes, the the goals that you set forward in your long-term goals that we looked at in the big first 2 slides. And so I want to give you guys about 25 minutes to kind of look through that logic model, kind of brainstorm, like, where do you want to go next in your process? Like, you have these long-term goals. What's the first thing you need to do? And look at the inquiry model, and like, maybe what you need to do is sit there and research this, or look at the data. It's really, it's a knee-jerk reaction to act first without having the basic and data, which we want to, in the end, we want that action to happen. But sometimes you actually need to take the time to look at the problem. So I want to give you some time to do that. So Ari is going to help me by breaking you guys out into 2 groups. And then I'm going to put the links in the chat so you can actually link to these Google Docs. And that way you'll have access to the, access to these afterwards. So you can kind of brainstorm together, and then you'll have access to them. So I'm going to put this, send to everyone. I'm going to put this into, this is the onboarding.
And before I send out or send everyone to your breakout sessions, I'll let you know what group you're going to be in, so that way you know which of these links to click on. So members of our, and some of you are on both design teams, so I just kind of put you so that we'd have equal participation. So the onboarding breakout is going to consist of Adela, Estelita, Falu, Jose, Kimberly, Laurel, and Rajdeep. So that's our onboarding breakout. So you'll have the first link. And then Araceli, Gina, Noelle, Sandy, Shannon, and Tara, that's going to consist of the student success team. So you're going to click on the second link. And then I thought we could pop into each group, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Okay, so before I send you guys to breakout rooms, does anyone have any questions? And it's okay.
Yeah. Think about your North Star first, and kind of like where you're going to go with that, and figure out what your North Star is going to be. Because once you start getting into the logistics of what you're going to be doing, you need to remember what that North Star is. So start that conversation and then start. And if you don't, you're not going to be able to fill it all out today, especially in the 25 minutes, 20 minutes we're going to give you, but we want to give you some time to work together on it.
Okay, any questions? Okay, you should get an invitation to join your breakout room right now.
Thank you, Ari.
And it seemed very intriguing. I love the idea of so I thought I would run it by you guys. Right now they've got that NPA software, and that's their scheduling software that they use.
And Stephanie, are you able to access the breakout groups? Because I made you a co-host.
I am not.
Because I can put you in a room initially if you'd like to join one.
Sure. Let me see if I can get to them first. I don't think I can remote control. No. No. I don't think I can.
Okay.
Is there anything? I don't know if I got to what you were wanting to get to for this, and I apologize for that. Is there anything else you want to kind of focus on for the next when they come back?
I think it's more about kind of helping to start the process with these logic models that you've set up.
Yeah.
And then I can kind of talk about next steps in terms of like where we're going to go from here. So I think it's really just, and if you are okay with it, I would like you to work with the onboarding team, just because that's less of my area of expertise to kind of help with those conversations. And then I can go to the student success team to help them.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So when we come back, we'll do like a little bit of a report out, and then I'll kind of go through the 90-day plan real quick, just to kind of give them another tool. And then we'll get you to the next steps for it.
And just checking, we're going to bring everybody back at like 3:45, 3:50.
Probably 3:45.
Okay, 3:45. So I'll make sure, since I have control of that. So I'm
that
going to
work?
send you, that works perfectly. So I'm going to send you now to the onboarding team,
Okay.
and then
Thank
I will
you.
go to student success.
All right. Yeah, it looks
Okay.
like most people are back. Yeah.
I think almost everyone's back. So I want to welcome everyone back. If the onboarding team had a discussion like we did in student success, then we have a lot of ideas for things, kind of maybe big picture, things that we would like to work on, and maybe not so much the activities that we need to do, but that's for a follow-up discussion. So I kind of want to talk now next steps / maybe goals for the students success team and the onboarding team as we move forward with the rest of the semester. So right now we're kind of at the stage where we are deciding what we want to be talking about essentially. And so I think the next meeting that we're going to have with each of the design teams will be to review the notes that came up from this discussion, as well as to kind of set some guiding principles for us as we move forward with starting to look at onboarding practices and student success practices at our campus. And then Stephanie has shared with me a kind of planner for developing a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And I think each of the design teams will kind of work on that so we can decide, what's reasonable for us to set as a goal this semester. What topics do we want to start investigating or practices and programs that we want to start looking at? And then how are we going to have forums, discussions, workshops to solicit feedback from our campus community to help us with these conversations. So that's just kind of like at a glance what's happening next. And in fact, I'm checking my calendar because I don't remember which design team has a meeting tomorrow. It's the student success design team. So we have a meeting tomorrow at 11 where we're going to basically be picking up this conversation and starting to set goals for this semester.
All right, do you want me to go over the 90-day thing real quick and show
Sure.
you kind of like what the plan is? Okay. So this is another tool that you can use because even when you chunk it out into a logic model, that's a lot of stuff to do. And so what we also often use is what we call the 90-day plan. And this comes out of the SOVA group. And so we have these 90-day plans where it's just, what can you do in 90 days? And you put in there, you give yourself a time limit because oftentimes, especially when semester gets crazy, you're like, oh, I'll just put that off to later, or, in this semester, that two things. But if we break it out into that 30, 60, 90 days and give yourself paths to do each one of those things, it keeps you on track. And if it doesn't take you 90 days to complete something and you can finish it early, that's great. Take a minute, take 2 weeks to think about it and then move on to the next thing. But again, it's chunking even more what you're actually going to be doing in those 90 specific days. And so it's the kind of, again, the what, who, how, and when as you go through the process. And so this is kind of what it looks like if you do a 90-day cycle where you decide what are you going to do in 30 days, what are you going to do in 60 days, and what you can do in 90 days. And then you can actually use that inquiry model where you're like, okay, for 30 days, we're going to actually figure out what we're going to do. We're going to do the inquiry part here. The next 60 days, we're going to figure out how we're going to assess it and how we're going to put it forward. And then 90 days, we're going to submit it and we're going to have it go through everybody and we're going to complete it. And so it allows you to put all that information in. And it kind of aligns with the logic model where you actually talk about who's in charge, who's the owner, who are the others implicated. So that's kind of your collaborators that you're going to work in here. What's your due dates? What do you need? And then kind of a status model for at the end of that. So you know what's going on. So I just created a couple of them. We did a modified one for the Reedley College 90-day plan. So I remodeled it a little bit and set one up for you guys for the onboarding and student success teams. So you guys could have those to work on in your groups to kind of narrow down your focus specifically for a semester as that goes through. So are there questions about the process, or Ari, were there anything else you wanted to kind of facilitate today?
I would just, if anybody has any questions, I will be following up with the onboarding team to schedule our next meeting, because I might have actually tried that. I have to go back and look at all the emails that I sent and see if I did try to identify a time for us to meet. In fact, I think there's a doodle. I think there was a doodle that I sent out. But for the student success team, at least, we're meeting tomorrow at 11. So if you need to be invited to that, please send me an email so that you can be part of that conversation.
Yeah, Ari, you did send out a doodle. I don't think the date's been identified though.
Okay.
Did you guys find the logic model kind of discussion helpful to kind of break things down? Is it something that you guys can actually think you could move forward with that? Sorry, my cast decided he wants to say hello to everybody. So yeah. Okay, go Noel. Yeah.
Just waving at the cat.
Oh, hi. Yes, his name is Phineas. So he is he's my constant companion when I'm doing these types of things. Yeah.
I think it's helpful to kind of keep the big picture sort of long-term goals in mind and then breaking it up into what can we do, like what's an activity or something that we can do now to start working on that. Because maybe this came up during onboarding, but in student success, there's kind of, big things to think about that are kind of intimidating to think about starting to address. But maybe if we could just kind of work, right? What was the metaphor that you used? Eat the elephant kind of thing or something like that. Just take a small bite, and that's progress.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's it then. If anybody has any other questions, I want to say thank you so much for participating. And I'm going to be having a look at the feedback that you guys left in the Google Docs as I prepare for our follow-up meetings to set those 30, 60, 90-day plans.
And then I'll make sure that Uri has the slides and everything like that. And so those embedded Google Docs you guys can use, change, modify. You guys can create your own if you want to create those. But I just wanted to give you guys some samples that you guys could work through. And again, if you have questions or need help later on, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions. You guys are doing amazing and brave work. And I'm really excited about what you guys are doing and your focus on students and your just your dedication to this work. So thank you guys for doing it for our students.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.